Hello and welcome to the Developer Insights Germany 2020 edition. It's such a pleasure to be able to give you some of the insights and statistics on developers and tech folks living and working in this country. Let's dive right in. In this presentation, we are going to look at a couple of things. One is getting a general overview of this country and the statistics here. Then we will look into the profiles of developers and tech folks. We will look at the job market. We will delve a little bit into the local insights and then also look at some of the communities. So let's go. Germany enjoys high economic success. Corona might have dampened this a little bit, yes, but I am very confident that the numbers will go up again. And what we have already been seeing is that there are a lot of jobs coming up again. The companies have had the good fortune to have programs available in Germany. So generally, Germany is at the forefront when it comes to a lot of the technological aspects. And this is actually very much mirrored in the positions, in the landscape of people, in the educational landscape as well. So let's have a look at the general overview. When we look at the numbers in Germany, there are about 802,000 IT specialists generally, and those are the employed numbers. So all of the people that have employment in IT. That can be a developer, that can be a PO, that can also be a designer. Generally, we're talking about IT specialists. The Federal Agency for Employment looks at IT specialists from a very broad perspective. So these are 802,000 IT specialists. Overall, when we look at all of the numbers, we also have about 500,000 developers. That's sort of the average estimation. It could be higher, it could be lower, but in comparison to everything, this is the number that I found. And it does not necessarily mean that those are 500,000 developers out of those 802,000 IT folks, because we also have about 200,000 IT freelancers. So all in all, we have about 1 million people in this country who work in the tech sector, either as employees or as freelancers themselves. And of those, about 500,000 are developers. When we look at the overall numbers in the IT sector, the number has been rising steadily since or for the last years. 2019 has actually seen quite a peak, and I'm very, very interested to see how Corona will impact this in the numbers that are coming up. Usually the Federal Agency for Employment publishes the numbers once a year, so we will see how this is reflected, and this is really, really interesting. So we will see how it impacts here. But generally, numbers are on the rise. There are more and more employees in the IT sector overall. Now let's dive a little bit into the profiles. Developers and IT specialists in Germany are very, very versatile, and this is again very much mirrored in the numbers. When we look at some of the main study subjects of people that go into IT, number one, without competition, is obviously computer science. And this is good news. We have lots of offerings here in Germany for education in computer science, be it at university, be it in vocational training, which is very much a thing in Germany. But it's really nice to see that computer science is actually number one, and as we expected. Then other kinds of engineering subjects are number two. So, for example, electrical engineering. I've seen a lot of people transfer from electrical engineering to actually programming. And then natural science also is a good contender for people going into IT. I've met a lot of physicists over my time. I've met a lot of people that studied chemistry before, because there is sort of this natural knack for math, and you can relate a lot of the concepts. A lot of data scientists I've seen that come from, for example, biomedical sciences. So this is one of the sources for this phenomenon where we have the fields represented. I would actually be curious to see whether the humanities will gain in numbers over the next years because of all the bootcamp graduates who, to a large share, come from humanities subjects. When we look at gender diversity in IT, Germany is actually not a very good example. While 29% of people that start out studying computer science, when we look classically at computer science, actually identify as female or non-binary, this number drops quite drastically to about 19% at graduation. Again, we need to consider that Germany is a country with a high focus on vocational education, so we shouldn't just look at unis and universities of applied sciences. But it's interesting to see that the number drops down so drastically. So about 10%, or you would have to say proportionally again as well, but in the overall numbers, 10% drop in female share of people from start of the studies to graduation of the studies, which is, to be honest, is a horrible thing to see. But the worst thing of it all is that we have, at the end of the day, only 16% of women or non-binary people in IT roles overall. So we're not just looking at computer science graduates, because some of those actually could go on to study or to work in other roles, other subjects. But it's interesting to note that about 16% of those working in IT are female, and that encapsulates everything. That encapsulates people that have graduated from other subjects as well. So overall, Germany is not a role model when it comes to diversity, and the projections don't look much better either. So this is actually rather disappointing when we think about it, but it explains quite a lot of things that we see around us working in tech. I work in tech too, so it's what we see is just a lot of monolithic representation, and there are a lot of initiatives, which I will delve into later on as well, that seek to improve this. But at the same time, this is how it is, and this is what we are working with. So Germany is not a role model, unfortunately. When we look at the graduates, when it comes to IT professionals, or the graduates among the IT professionals, again, this number has been steadily rising since 2013. And my prediction would be that it will go up even further over the years, Corona or not. But it's also interesting to see that the rise hasn't actually been that drastic, considering that there is a very, very high demand for people that fill the jobs, which we will see later on as well. But it's from about 40% in 2013, it has gone to just a little bit over 55, 56% in 2018. So actually, again, Germany has so many good offers. There are so many things available. You can go to bootcamp, you can go to uni, you can do vocational training in this field. And still, people have not used their chance to go to take these routes more, which is, again, very much the picture that Germany presents. And from when you ask me, I think it's because of our schooling system, which does not really encourage STEM subjects that much. A lot of things are outdated. We are not very digitized in the way we teach in a lot of the federal states. So this is actually quite interesting to see that it actually hasn't gone up that much, and we need to get more people into this field. When we look at the age, it's interesting to see that between 70 and 80% of all developers in Germany are under 35. When I looked at the stats, some of them inclined more towards 70%, some of them inclined more towards 80%, but overall, this is a very, very high number of developers. Specifically here, we're looking at developers and not IT specialists, but think about it. Under 35, that means, for one thing, that there is not a very high supply of people that have management experience, not because they are not able to or they haven't risen in the ranks quite quickly, but because it's just an impossibility to have long years of management experience. When you're only under 35, you have a couple of years of management experience, and that's that. So all of the concepts that we're looking at in other fields are basically chucked out of the window in IT, and specifically in development, because you don't have the structure of a large supply of mentors available and people that have 20 or 30 plus years in the industry. And that is also very, very interesting. And looking at the numbers again, it was also interesting that the biggest share of developers is between 25 and 35. So even those below this age are still a bit less represented. So again, there is potential to have more experience, to develop people more, to have more offerings overall when it comes to maturing the career ladder and so forth. The last job change for, in this case also specifically developers, has been in a spectrum of between 1 and 4 years for the main part. So we see a lot of changes. People are very prone to change overall, and this is also not very surprising if you think about it. Being in tech, you see a lot of people coming, a lot of people leaving, and the average time of a developer in a company seems to be around 2 years. And this is also mirrored here. This, by the way, is taken from Stack Overflow, and it's interesting to see that specifically for Germany, even the 1 year range is the largest, and then you have 1 to 2 years, and you have 3 to 4 years, and then again over 4 years a bit more represented. But this is interesting. A smaller share never had a job, maybe because they're still so young, or they are contractors, or better said, freelancers. So this is interesting. Lots of change, lots of movements, and if you're a recruiter, if you're a hiring manager, this is probably something that is on your agenda as well, or that you can see reflected in your reality. Educational level is also a really interesting thing to note, because the majority of people who answered the Stack Overflow survey have either a bachelor or master degree. And it's very, very common in Germany not to leave uni with just a bachelor's degree. It's the general expectation is that you have a master's degree, because traditionally with diploma you used to study for 4 or 5 years anyway. So there has not been that much of a change in the approaches, but it's still very interesting to see that actually the master degrees are much more represented than the bachelor's degrees. And secondary and some uni or professional is also very well represented, simply because, again, we have vocational education here in Germany. This is a concept, this is something that is very widespread, and this is something that people use a lot. Maybe not necessarily for being a programmer, but for a couple of other fields it is very, very common to not go to uni. And there is a fair share also of people who have a doctorate degree, which of course is great because we profit from their knowledge. When it comes to the languages that people are looking at, most wanted is Python, Go, Rust, TypeScript, and JavaScript. And most loved is actually not that different, because most loved is Rust is number 1, and TypeScript and Clojure, WebAssembly, and Elixir. So interestingly enough, the languages that are most loved are not necessarily the languages that we find well represented in job ads generally, but they do kind of correlate with most wanted. So I have a team that works with Rust, and every time I say that one of my teams works with Rust, there is very much sort of a, yes, that's great moment, which is, I think, this is reflected here very well, because it's both under the most wanted and the most loved languages overall. So might be a thing if you're thinking about which kind of technology do you want to use. So this gives you some orientation in what is most wanted, what is most loved, and how people orient themselves, and where you might even get talent and not have expected to get talent. When it comes to how developers deepen their knowledge, 92% say they taught themselves in some shape or form. Again, this is not very surprising, probably, thinking about how developers are personality-wise and what the requirements of the job are. You need to be able to teach yourself, and this is so crucial. So 92% say yes, I taught myself in some shape or form. 50% contribute to open source. That is a good way to get training, to get into the routines, to learn new skills, to learn new aspects, exchange with others. Also 50% say that they take online courses. Which developer hasn't yet taken a Udacity course or an edX course or a Coursera course, or just gone onto YouTube and learned something from there? Apart maybe copying from Stack Overflow and other sources, right? That's sort of the usual route. And I commend everyone who benchmarks well. 43% do on-the-job training. And I think this is a very German thing as well, providing on-the-job training wherever it's necessary, from in-house trainings to pairings to mentorships and so forth. So this is very much reflecting of what Germany does. And 23% say they participate in hackathons. There is a big community world out there, and basically any technology is well represented in Germany. So people make use of that, and that's good. But again, there are so many offers, this number could actually be much higher. 15% also complete an industry certification. Who hasn't yet seen it? Like all those notifications on LinkedIn with I've done my AWS certification, my Google Cloud, I've done my Scrum Master course. So yeah, go every one of you. This is commendable. This is admirable that you're going for this. When we look at continuous education in general, I found about 36,000 training positions. So that's vocational education, just from the sense of how many do we have available. Again, Corona probably impacts that quite a lot. And I would assume that the number would go down towards the end of the year, but still less so than in other fields, maybe apart from the system-relevant professions and areas. I found about 20,000 IT university courses or IT-related subjects overall. Again, we're looking here at a very broad field of IT because sometimes in these kind of things it's very difficult to distinguish between classical development or software programming, software production to actually IT in the general sense. And there are a handful of bootcamp providers as well. Most of them sit in Berlin, but in Munich we have now bootcamp providers, in Frankfurt and Hamburg. So pretty much anywhere you go as a curious student, you will be able to get some training. And, as I said before, countless community trainings. Me having been a regional lead for community developer programs, I can tell you there is so much available. Go on meetup.com, go on Colloq, go on other platforms, go on Facebook. Some of the groupings are on Facebook, Facebook developer circles, for example. And you have so much available there. Just pick and choose. There are so many great people out there, and this is so great of you to do this, that provide trainings, that provide activities, that help people exchange. So go for it, it's worth it. Let's take a look at the job market. Software developers are high in demand, and hiring managers are wringing their hands for medical personnel and technical staff. Let's see why that is. When we look at the expert demand index of which professions are most in demand in this country, number one is actually nursing. And that can, of course, take many forms, like nursing older people and nursing people in the hospital. But nursing is by far number one. Then come doctors. Then comes HR, probably because of the number of positions that are available. Then comes finance. And only then comes IT. So yes, people in the IT field are highly sought after, but they're not as sought after as other professions. And now with Corona happening, nursing and doctors will go up. HR will go up. It has already gone up because obviously when people are being let go, you need someone to support this process. Finance might not go up, might actually go down. Science and marketing, who knows what might happen there, but generally IT will, I predict that we will remain quite steady with the numbers, or we will be in the same sort of field of a bracket. But yeah, it's interesting to see how will Corona impact that and what will we see there. When we look at the most sought profiles, it's also interesting to see that software development by far is number one on this, 27.2%. This is amazing. And then comes support, administrator roles, engineers also quite well represented, because in this study, basically the difference was made between what is in the job ad, what is in the title, and what is not. So if we group this together, we would even see a bigger share than we have here. Consultant is also fairly well represented, then specialist, project manager, programmer, architect. There are not a lot of specialized architect roles. And then we also have a small share of testers. So thank you to all the testers who make the life of the teams a bit easier by being so thorough. Or should I say make it not easier because they find things. But anyway, software development by far number one. When we look at the open positions, and again, this is so thrilling because we don't yet know how Corona will impact this, but we can make at least some assumptions from the numbers that we have. And from when it comes to developers, I found numbers for 2017 and 2018. And in 2017, there were 20,000 unfilled developer positions. Guess how many it were in 2018? 54,000. This is a massive increase. And with IT generally, so when we look at the whole IT field, it's very similar. In 2018, these were the numbers that I could find. We have 82,000. And in 2019, guess what? 124,000. These are the official numbers of the Bitkom Association, so they would know. And this is just mind-blowing if you think about it, that there has been such a big increase in open positions that couldn't be filled within such a short amount of time. So amazing. And again, how will Corona impact this? We will see this. I hope that I will be able to compile the numbers again at the end of the year or towards next year so that we can actually compare this. When we look at the fields with IT demands, ICT is by far the biggest factor here, 43.2%, good representation. But then we have the producing sector, and services, which also in this case includes public authorities, who, or should I say that they have a big demand for people with IT skills, be it from all the way from Bundeswehr, they need encryption specialists, but all the way down to local administrations who need people that support. So this is a very typical profile for Germany overall, because you do have sort of the classical areas, industry sectors still represented. Trade also has a big share, finance, traffic and logistics, and ultimately education. But ICT by far has the most demand. When we look at supply versus demand, and again, those are pre-corona numbers, 47.8% of all IT jobs are advertised via recruiters. This is wild. If you think about it, that means only slightly over half of the jobs are available via the average and standard platforms out there, or the job boards. But the most, or one of the biggest shares, almost half of the share, is recruiters. And that also tells you how much money there is to be made in tech recruiting on both sides of the chain. 2.7% is the unemployment rate among IT specialists. Again, not very surprising. And I would say that Corona impacts this. I would see this go up at least 2 or 3 times, I would say, but not long term, and not as heavily as it would go up in other sectors. That is my guess, and that is my prediction. Again, I'm looking forward to checking this end of the year, next year, and to see how it changed. 7.2% of all ads advertise IT jobs. Thinking about the expert demand index that we looked at and how many people are actually sought in nursing and medical field, then this is still a fairly large share of all of the job ads. But again, thinking about the fact that only half of all ads are even advertised, how does that correlate? So there is a high demand, and I predict there will continue to be a high demand. Also very interesting, Germany is a country of migration. And you all know the stats say so, the studies say so, personal experience says so. Diversity increases innovative potential. And here we see that Germany has a huge lack of people that are being qualified internally. We've seen that in the numbers. But what happens then is that from 2017 to 2018, we have a 17% increase in migration in IT workers. So that means from 2017 to 2018, we had a 17% more of people with a migratory background in the IT field overall. And again, I would be curious to see the numbers of the last years, but my prediction is this will, with Corona, this will go even more up, because we have the positions at the end of the day still. Even in a crisis, there will be jobs available, and maybe not plenty, but still sufficient. So people will come, people who are qualified will come and will take those roles if there is no national supply for it. And even if there is, it's good that we have a good mixture of people represented, so we can have good products for everyone and have innovation in there. So I very much feel this is a very good development, and I think we can only benefit from people who come in with different ideas, different backgrounds, and just different perspectives. And yeah, my teams have a couple of experts, and it's really, really amazing working with them. When we look at employers and their frustrations with the job market, 72% say that salary expectations of candidates are too high. 52% say salary expectations do not match qualifications for the job. 41% say candidates don't have the adequate qualifications. This is actually something that we see left and right? So this does not surprise me. 27% say that results in tests are not adequate. 32% see a lack of soft skills. And 20% have candidates who are not ready to move to a different location. Again, all of these things might be impacted by Corona, because now that we've all gotten used to home office, at least in tech, who knows what kind of shifts and what kind of changes we will likely see in the future. What is also astonishing, 12% of employers receive no applications whatsoever for their IT and development positions. Let that sink in. No applications whatsoever. And this again in a country like Germany, economically high standard and so forth. But again, with Corona and things being less location dependent than they used to be, I predict a change. I predict quite a bit of change. Let's look at some of the local aspects. Let's briefly dive into that. Germany as a country is unlike UK or France. A lot of the things, companies, developers, so staff and resources, funding for startups is located in the big capitals like Paris or London. We see this in other countries duplicated as well. Germany is different. It's decentralized. And this is reflected very much in the number of job ads we see by federal state. Bavaria leads the numbers because Bavaria simply is, by land mass, the biggest federal state, directly followed by Northern Rhine-Westphalia, North Rhine-Westphalia, which is kind of surprising because Northern Rhine-Westphalia is actually the federal state with the largest number of people. The largest number of people overall in all of the federal states is in Northern Rhine-Westphalia. And this is very, very much attributable to the fact that Bavaria has a bigger economic footprint. Munich is an economic powerhouse, Nuremberg is so, and Northern Rhine-Westphalia does have a couple of cities where that is the case, but the tech scene is not as elaborate or as developed as it is, for example, in Bavaria or other states like Berlin. Berlin should probably be higher up, but it's just numbers wise, it's just a different game because Berlin has about, I think, close to 4 million inhabitants. Northern Rhine-Westphalia has about, I think, 15 or 16, if I'm correct. So it's basically a numbers game. But what is interesting, and that's the thrilling point of it all, is that if we look at the number of developers per federal state, Berlin is on third place. And that again does not surprise me because Berlin is the city where you have the highest numbers of startup founding, as evidenced by all of the reports that we see, for example, from EY. Bavaria obviously has the largest number. Generally, Northern Rhine-Westphalia also is a good contender, but Berlin basically is tech city. You do have a lot of media and gaming in Hamburg. You do have in Munich quite a bit of tech sector and startups represented, but Berlin has it all. Berlin has established companies. Berlin has a thriving startup scene. Again, we will see how that impacts overall when we look at Corona and so forth. But living in both Munich and having lived both in Munich and in Berlin, I can say that Berlin is by far the city with the bigger impact. With one exception, maybe, that Munich has very established tech companies like Google, Adobe, Microsoft, and so forth. They are all located in Munich and not necessarily in Berlin, or they only have very small offices. And you can also very clearly see that the eastern German states very much are on the last places because they don't have a lot of tech sector generally. So you would also not find a lot of developers or developer jobs there. Let's look into the communities. Big tech companies sponsor local groups. However, the local tech scenes don't need push. They have established great initiatives on their own. And I'll tell you why. When we again look at the Stack Overflow report, it's interesting to note that Germany is the number one, not Stack Overflow, GitHub. When we look at the GitHub, I think it's the Octoverse, State of the Octoverse report. It's number 3. It's the number 3 region, which is quite interesting because obviously there are large countries like Russia, like US, like India, like China, where you probably have a bit more developers in numbers overall, like large numbers. But still, we are very much in the top spheres of contributing on open source, which also again is a question of voice and how well are countries and perspectives and cultures represented in products. So Germany does dominate at the end of the day. It's on par with the UK. That's also interesting to note. Usually the predictions that we look at assume that in about 1 or 2 years, the UK might have more developers. And again, how does Brexit impact and how does Corona impact? We don't know yet. So it will be thrilling to see how this develops. Also interesting to note, and I wanted to mention that here, that Switzerland, which is part of the DACH region overall, had 36% contributor growth over the last year, which is enormous. And it also tells you a lot about Switzerland as a tech place generally, and also DACH's impact as a whole. So DACH meaning Germany plus Austria plus Switzerland. So very interesting. When we look at the big community, the big tech giants and their community groups, we have a couple of obviously big programs represented. We have Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, Amazon, IBM, Mozilla, and Facebook. And those were some of the, I basically looked at the numbers. I basically looked at how many groups do you have. And it's interesting to see that Microsoft, which in this case encompasses also office-related groups, so not necessarily only tech groups, has about 70. Google has about 35 in Germany. Salesforce, with their Trailblazer program, which again also encompasses non-development related groups, has 22. Amazon has about 19 AWS groups, and those are core AWS. We have 17 IBM groups, big data, Power AI. We have about 9 Mozilla associated groups. I think a couple of them are Rust groups as well. And we have about 4 Facebook developer circles. I mentioned them previously before. So that's interesting to see that leading in this field actually Microsoft and Google, whereas obviously Microsoft has a bit of numbers power because they also have office-related groups. And then with Amazon, very pure, then Salesforce again, very mixed. And then Google, very straight up GDG and Women Tech Makers groups, which do also host events with a non-development focus, but mostly focus on Android development, cloud, and so forth. And full disclosure, obviously, I used to be regional lead for the DACH region for the Google developer programs. And yeah, it was real fun. It was great fun to be able to increase the diversity numbers, to help groups thrive and to discover new technologies, and that was really great. I very much look back to that time very fondly. So really nice. When we look at the tech community ambassadors, so there are a lot of programs where individual people get a designation. And in this overview, I had to leave out, let me go back a bit. I had to leave out, what was it? Mozilla. I had to leave out Mozilla with the tech speakers because they have no concrete list of people in this country. But there is also the Mozilla Tech Speakers program. And I know a couple of great people who are on that, so really recommendable. But just numbers-wise, I couldn't count it because there is no delineation of who's based in Germany currently. For the other programs, it was fairly easy, and I looked at Microsoft MVPs, which again encompasses also office-related tasks or office-related focal areas. I looked at Google GDEs, Google Developer Experts, at SAP Influencers, IBM Champions, AWS Heroes, and Salesforce MVPs. And it's interesting to note that looking at the numbers, diversity is actually kind of non-existent in Germany. It's basically, it's hard to look at. Microsoft has an okay share. Google has the biggest share of all the groups, and I also found one non-binary person among them, which I know because I know the person. I might have misgendered some people in the other programs, so if I did, I'm very sorry, and please let me know if I misgendered anyone, and I will absolutely fix this. But for this research, I had to categorize at some point, so I went by the gender that it looked like the person had. And yeah, the other programs, it looks very sad. For AWS and Salesforce, we don't even have one female or non-binary MVP in this region. So we need to get better in Germany. And there are loads and loads of initiatives, which I will delve into later on as well, that fix this and which you can support. And please, again, in anything you do, in anything when you encourage people, when you have programs, when you work with people, think about how you can increase the diversity so that we have different numbers represented there soon. And we will be able to build products that have an outlook that include people of all kinds of backgrounds and that actually sell better for that matter. So really interesting to see that. Overall, as I said, Germany is decentralized. Developers are basically to be found everywhere. We have developers in Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, Cologne, Düsseldorf, Stuttgart, Nuremberg. But we also have developers in smaller villages because we have world market leaders that actually are not located in big cities. We have tech meetups in almost every town that has over 50,000 inhabitants. So even in Eastern Germany, we do have quite a fair share of meetups, which is actually surprising if you think about it, because Eastern Germany has not such a technological focus or population density to support that. But still, I would bet that you would have to drive a maximum of half an hour to 40 minutes to find the next tech meetup that you can go to as a developer in Germany. And it's as many challenges we have in this country when it comes to, you know, supporting and now with Corona and everything that, like social systems and so forth, it is fairly great to see that we have established to be, despite our not so innovative impact at times, which again is reflected in some of the studies and informations, we have managed to be so unique in the way we build technology that we don't all have to pull it in the big cities. So this is really amazing to see. Let's look at some of the groups that we have in the community sphere. And the largest group, meaning the group with the biggest number of people in it, is actually Zalando Tech Events in Berlin, which has, when I last looked it up, about 9,500 people. So again, we will see how Corona will impact some of the meetup groups in the shorter or longer term. And just seeing that in other countries, this number is actually fairly standard. But again, you have the effect, for example, in cities like Paris or cities like, let's say, San Francisco, you have so many developers and tech people pooled in one place that it's actually fairly easy to have that group size. With Germany being this decentralized, seeing that it's still 9,500 in the biggest group is actually quite a success, because it means that we still have a good footprint, but what we do have more than that is have groups everywhere with a smaller size, which I will also delve into right now. So I've brought along some examples to just give you a bit of an indicator of the size and the impact of groups. For example, here you see JavaScript groups, with Berlin being the strongest with about 4,000 members and Munich with about 2,000 members. And these are, by the way, the biggest overall. So I looked at, I would say, fairly all of the groups with this specific tag on meetup.com, and this is basically, these are the biggest groups that I could find. Java is a bit bigger, interestingly enough. That might change with all the bootcamp graduates coming out, but Java in Hamburg actually has almost 4,000 members, whereas in Munich you have about 2,000, and in Berlin and Brandenburg you have about 2,500. Kotlin, which is on the rise, obviously followed right after Java. There is an intention behind that. You have the biggest one in Berlin with about 1,500 members, and the third largest one in Hamburg with about 560. There are a lot of smaller groups still, absolutely no doubt about that, but this is some of the bigger size groups here. Python is actually very popular with 6,000 members with the user group in Berlin. Munich has 2,800, and the user group in Hamburg has about 1,000. Rust, which is again up and coming and most loved, has 1,600 in Berlin, has about 660 in Munich, and about 500 in Hamburg. And this is interesting because, again, one of my teams works with Rust, so I've had a couple of discussions about the community sphere and Rust, and it's just interesting to see that it's growing by leaps and bounds, so we will probably see more on that front soon. We have Go with about almost 3,000 in Berlin with the GDG, and the GDG in Munich has about 1,500, and the GDG in Hamburg has 700. And it was fairly interesting to see that apart from the women who go, who also exist, yes, and they are fabulous, all the larger Go groups are GDGs, and there are not that many GDGs with a Go label anyway, so really, really interesting to see that. So looking at all of the available information that we've had so far, and some of the things that we have seen in the community sphere, and again, how will this be impacted by Corona, right? If now we have all the virtual meetups, some groups don't even have meetups, but what we do see is that there is a movement. There's still the motivation to keep going, to educate people in tech, to grow, to qualify, specifically in these times, because now is the time to be qualified and to find those jobs. And one of the things that I really like about the tech sphere is that it puts so much effort into increasing diversity, specifically in the community sphere. So I didn't want to finish my presentation, my talk here, without giving you a bit of insight into the diversity initiatives in tech. With these initiatives, I'm only looking at supra-regional initiatives. So I'm not looking at anything that has sort of only a local label. There are, for example, groups like the Female Tech Leaders in Munich. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at groupings that have a global or a regional presence in several places. So let's dive in. oh, sorry, I went back a bit. The Rails Girls, which in Berlin is, I think, now called Code Curious, so it's a bit less age and gender related, but they do have probably the most they are most represented in the cities in Germany. So you have Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Cologne, Hanover, and Saarbrücken, which is surprising because in Saarbrücken, again, there's not much tech of the sort of the beaten path, but still, it does show that Germany has this decentralized quality. So great initiative there, Rails Girls. The Women Tech Makers, the program that I had the honor of taking care of as well, has 3 groups in Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich, whereby the Berlin group is the most active one, and the Hamburg group is also very, very active. And great ladies, great men that are taking care of those groups, so very much recommended. Talks about career and hiring just as much as deep dive cloud workshops and so forth. So a big sphere. And I should always say with these groupings, they are open to men too. They are not just available for women. They are mainly addressed towards women, but not only. Men can participate and are highly encouraged to participate because to change things around, we need to have the allies on board. So men, please feel free to attend and to bring in your creative ideas. The Pi Ladies, and again, I know a couple of organizers, very, very great people, in Berlin, Munich, and Hamburg, and Berlin is by far the biggest initiative. So Pi Ladies teach Python, some other aspects as well, but workshops, meetups, they have everything. Women Who Go, I mentioned them previously that with the Go groups, there are also the Women Who Go, and they are actually fairly strong here in Berlin. So, and again, I know the organizers, great job, very much focused on getting women into learning Go and finding jobs in Go. Women Who Code is, I think, a global organization as well, and some of the organizers are also very good friends of mine. And they, to this point, are only represented in Berlin. They are not represented in any other places in Germany, but they are very strong here with over 5,000 members, which is sort of on par with the Women Tech Makers. So really, really great initiative there. They also do anything and everything under the sun, technical workshops. They do a lot of giveaway tickets and places for conferences and so forth, so really recommendable. There are also the View Vixens in Dach, which has sort of a more Dach perspective, so they are not necessarily that related to one specific place. They were fairly active in Frankfurt for a while, are active in Berlin as well, I think. So they teach Vue in the basic sense, but again, also have a great spectrum, great people, very recommended. The accessibility groups, of which I'm also part because I'm a co-organizer of the Berlin group, and we also have a group represented in Munich and in Hamburg. So our goal is to increase accessibility and to help people increase accessibility. That can be web accessibility, that can be in other areas. So really, really great initiatives there. You can learn something, and since it's accessibility, the probability that people with chronic illness or disability are present is probably a bit higher than in other groupings. And then finally, the queer JS groups who are present in Berlin and Munich, who hold up the rainbow flag and have different workshops, meetups on the topic of JavaScript and associated topics. So again, I know the organizers, and it's just great to see that we have not only, let's say, gender diversity represented, but also that we are looking at other aspects of diversity. There are also a handful of groups that are taking care of the topic of networking Black people and people of color in tech, which is great. But since they have not yet established a super regional initiative, I didn't list them here, but they exist. They exist, so please look them up. Please do your part in increasing diversity in tech so that we can change the numbers around and that we can make sure that people have the chance to be embraced, to learn, to grow, to be the managers of tomorrow. And all of these initiatives help do that, and this is just so great. So kudos to all of you. It's great to have been working together with some of you, to be co-organizing together with you. Let's do more and keep going so that we have a better picture presented soon. So this was it from my side. Lots of numbers, lots of stats. There's always obviously more to do. We can always put in more effort and more amount and whatnot, and there's always there are always possibilities and there's always potential. But looking at some of the stats, just knowing how the status quo is a really, really good basis. Knowing how that will or might be impacted by Corona, thinking about how that might be impacted by Corona, and a bit of Brexit also, because obviously in Europe we are all connected in a way. So this is really interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to delving into the numbers again. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me on all the channels to get in touch with me. I'm very active on LinkedIn, I'm very active on Twitter, obviously. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel so that you get more updates in the future from me and my side. And also, if you have any ideas, if you think that I missed some stats, I missed some insights, there are some things that we could still look at, then I'm very, very happy if you get in touch with me, if you let me know, and then we can explore the world of stats together. Also happy to supply you with a bit more information in detail, because obviously in this presentation I had to cut out a couple of things. So let me know if you're curious, let me know if you want to exchange. And thank you very much for listening to this overview of stats on developer and IT folks. I'm so happy to be working in this industry and to be working with great people, to be able to have great teams, and yeah, just enjoying the motivation of people to learn and to grow and to make great products for each and every one of us. Thank you.